Good afternoon, and welcome to the Suburban Realtors Alliance Regional Legislative Update. My name is Jamie Ridge, and I'm President and CEO of the SRA. Also from our staff, we have Pete Kennedy, our Communications Manager, who will be acting as a host of the meeting. I want to say a special thank you to our guest panelists this afternoon, who have set aside this time to provide us with the latest legislative news from Harrisburg. This is a special group of friends that are with us, and I want to tell you why I say that. From the Pennsylvania Senate, representing the 9th District, we have Senator Tom Killion. Not only was Tom a crucial leader most recently with the passage of HB 2412 out of the Senate, he has been one of our industry's strongest supporters over many years, including the 13 years he served in the House of Representatives. I'll tell you just a short story of how this past support has impacted all of you. In 2016, we were advocating for legislation that would stop municipalities from preventing real estate settlements by withholding use and occupancy permits. There was a point in the process where the legislation stalled in the Senate, and we were desperate to keep it moving on track. I was at the Capitol one day and ran into Senator Killion outside of the Senate chamber. I described the problem to him, and with no hesitation, he made a call that got the legislation moving again. That legislation was signed into law and has become Act 133 of 2016, which I hope you're familiar with by this time. Without his quick intervention, who knows whether it would have seen the light of day. So Tom, we welcome you to the webinar, and thank you for all you have done for us. As the author of HB 2412, which he will tell us about in just a few minutes, Representative Todd Polinchock does not need much of an introduction to all of you. His leadership resume in our industry is incredible. Past president of the Bucks County Association of Realtors and the Suburban Realtors Alliance, as well as the 2016 president of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. Those were his high-profile roles, which don't tell the entire story. Before ascending to all those leadership positions, Todd was fighting for each of you in Washington, D.C., in Harrisburg, and locally to ensure that important legislation that is vital to our industry was promoted and passed by our elected officials at all levels. That's the kind of work, often behind the scenes, that our members don't always hear about. But Todd was not looking for accolades. He just cares so much about our industry, as you'll hear, and what we stand for, the dream of home ownership, that he gladly volunteered for that hard work. So Todd, we're grateful for all that you do, and thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Jamie. It's my pleasure.
Finally, we have PAR CEO Mike McGee to round out the lineup. No one has fought harder through this pandemic on your behalf than Mike. I will let him describe those efforts during a segment, but I will also tell you that he has been fighting for many years on our behalf of the industry. Many of you may not be aware that Mike was the founding CEO of the Suburban Realtors Alliance, then called the Realtors Legislative Alliance in 1998. From 1998 through 2006, Mike built a solid foundation for our organization, which we are still benefiting from today. He understands the challenges we are facing at every level of government, and his experience has been invaluable to PAR and all of us throughout this challenging time. So thanks again to each of you, for the panelists, for being with us. And with those introductions out of the way, I'm going to ask Mike the opening question. Mike, PAR has been working tirelessly on multiple levels to assist our members during this time. Can you describe those efforts and also the parallel effort to convince Governor Wolf to deem real estate essential? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, and thanks for having me. And thank you to the Suburban Realtors Alliance for all of your support as we've been trying to work through the legislative process. Thank you to the local association CEOs who've been great partners throughout the years in really every aspect. Also, thank you, Representative Polinchock, for your leadership on House Bill 2412. And to Senator Killion, again, I've go back to him when he was a member of county council, and he's always been supportive of realtor initiatives. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what PAR has been working on behalf of the Realtor organization, immediately after the governor issued the closure order, the leadership team, line officers, President Festa, and a number of the other president-elects, we felt that it was important for, in particular, deals that were already in the pipeline to have a system to go through. And really the only way that we could make that happen was to get an industry-wide waiver for the real estate industry. So we submitted a request to DCED, as many of our other businesses did, but we didn't find out until early April that our waiver was going to be denied. In the meantime, the DCED had posted information that they were following federal guidelines, what's called the CISA guidelines, CISA, that were modified on March 28th. And in the March 28th revisions, they clearly identified real estate service providers as essential to the continuation of the economy. So we modified our request, our initial waiver request, and asked the governor to again deem real estate as life-sustaining. The feedback that we were getting from the administration offline was that we were not likely going to get an industry-wide waiver. But what we saw in the meantime was that they were somewhat listening to us because they were dropping guidance documents through the Department of State that addressed what could happen with real estate transactions that were under agreement prior to March 18th, and what in-person activities could or couldn't happen. But it was our opinion that those guidance documents were actually more confusing than they were necessarily helpful, and we continue to push for an industry-wide solution and a statewide solution. And one of the things that I can tell you that we've addressed as we've gone throughout this whole process, some of our members were not very supportive of the idea of opening real estate on a statewide basis. And what the leadership team kept falling back on was our mission statement. And that was that our mission is to promote a predictable and safe real estate transaction. And it was our opinion that the governor's approach was not creating that. And that is why we continue to pursue a waiver. Again, we were not having a whole lot of luck in the administrative realm. So because we weren't able to have a dialogue with the administration, we chose to turn to our legislative friends. And we initially supported Senate Bill 613, which would have required the governor to follow the CISA guidelines. One of the drawbacks of that approach, which we would acknowledge, is that it encompassed far more businesses than real estate. So the governor vetoed that legislation when it crossed his desk. Unfortunately, that was also passed mostly under partisan guidelines or partisan votes. When Representative Polinchock saw that Senate Bill 613 was vetoed, he teed up legislation that was specific to real estate, and I'll let him talk about that more. But that was our next and best option that we thought was pursuing legislation through 2412. Part of the reason we thought that is we had also supported a lawsuit that had been filed against the administration. We filed an amicus brief. That lawsuit ended up all the way in the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of the administration. So again, that left us very little alternative but to pursue a legislative remedy and allow real estate to open on a statewide basis. We are, and I'll let Todd get into this, but the bill did pass. It's currently on the governor's desk. He has publicly stated his doubts about the legislation and his inclination to veto it. I will point out that we have had over almost 8,000 responses to our call to action. So our hope is if we get enough pressure on the administration, on the governor, that will have an impact on his decision. But we are also preparing for what other alternatives we might have, whether it is trying to do a veto override, trying to work on another piece of legislation. But our real hope is that the administration would reach out to us and craft a solution that we think is workable, and hopefully through an executive order. So I'll stop my overview and then turn it back over to Jamie, and I'm sure there's going to be questions later.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Senator Killion, welcome. Glad you are with us. It looks like your audio is off. There you go. Good to have you with us, Tom.
Good to be here.
Let me ask you this question, Tom. Can you tell us a little bit about your efforts in the Senate to help address the issues that your constituents have faced due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, as you know, we moved several bills, as did the House, to try to get things opened back up. We've done a letter to, since something specific in a district, did a letter with some other members, House members, to the governor to move Chester County into the yellow phase. But it's been very frustrating. I mean, the governor's dug in. You heard his speech that if you wanted to open up your business responsibly, you were surrendering, and any politicians that supported you were cowards. I mean, that's where he's at. Hello?
Can you tell us about moving the bill through your committee?
Yeah, the bills came over from the House. We had it in our committee. We got some D votes. We only had, I think, on the Realtor bill, 3 no. In the committee, 3 no votes. We were only one vote shy on final passage because of your efforts. The pressure you put on members was extraordinary, and so we were 1 vote shy of a veto-proof vote. We need 33 and a third technically, and we were at 33. We needed 34. And that was all because of the Realtors lobbying and all the work you did behind the scenes and convincing members why this was the right, because it is the right thing to do. It makes no sense.
Right. That's a very good point. We did have strong bipartisan support, especially in this last vote in the House, as well as some very strong statements, including from Senator Denneman in the Senate. And so we hope that will weigh on the governor's decision, whether it's with this legislation or moving forward with a better executive order that we can all understand and that it will apply to all the counties. Todd, can you tell me just a little bit about your idea for HB 2412, how that came up, and how you convinced your colleagues to move it so quickly, because that was warp speed.
Absolutely, Jamie. Thank you so much. I also want to really quickly do a shout out to Senator Killion. When this was coming over to the Senate, he took my call right away, and we spoke about it, and he was able to call up a committee meeting on record time and get it moved out of his committee very quickly. So I want to thank him for that personally, for getting that done for us. As everyone knows, that process usually takes a lot longer than that, and he was very responsive and immediately was able to get that piece back to the floor of the Senate so that it could be considered. So thank you, Senator, for doing that for us. A little bit about the bill itself. Mike elaborated to it a little bit. We were hoping for 613. It was a little too broad-based for the governor. Actually, everything is a little too broad-based for the governor for some reason. But we needed to attack this. I mean, I think most of you know I've been a realtor now for about 18 years. Prior to taking this job, my license is current. I'm not actively selling houses. Trust me, this is a full-time job. But I do have a current license, and nobody better than me and realtors know how easy it is to do this transaction safely. Excuse me. Everybody knows that we can do that with minimal impact, minimal groups of folks, and that's why the legislation we came up with it. We came up with the idea of let's go soup to nuts on how we're going to do this, who we're going to allow in, and we looked at it from basically the initial stage of somebody wants to go see a house all the way to final closing. What are going to be the impediments? What are going to be the barriers to getting this transaction done? And the actual language of the bill was crafted by one of our SRA leadership guys and one of your state leaders, Chris Beeling. We kind of hammered this out. We said, okay, we got to let inspectors in. We got to let appraisers in. You got to have virtual tour people because that's going to be the future, looking at homes, virtual tour. Photographers, we got to be able to do we have to still be able to do in-person settlements. We do the car window ones now because some of the notaries that are allowed to do the virtual notaries aren't equipped for it. We can't get those systems in place. And some banks are not even accepting virtual notary signatures anyway. So we knew that had to go as well. We also put the piece in, and the Senate actually made it stronger for us in the Senate amendment, where we put in conditional use and occupancies. The Senate gave us full blanket use and occupancies to transact, so that doesn't hold up. There are municipalities in the Commonwealth that their code people aren't even at work. It's impossible to get a use and occupancy. So we wanted to remove that barricade too. So that was where the thought process to come up with 2412 came from. And then just old-fashioned making phone calls and talking to colleagues. And it wasn't. I will tell you, it wasn't a heavy lift. Everybody realizes that it's a pretty easy transaction to do with minimal impact to minimal safety impact. And I just needed to call them and get them on board. I think we had at final had about 55 co-sponsors, including 12 or 13 Democrats.
So, Todd, I understand that the first round of this legislation in the House led to a meeting with top staff from Governor Wolf's office. And can you tell us a little bit about that meeting, perhaps the discussion? And do you think that this second vote, the final vote, might lead to more of those types of meetings?
Well, I would hope so, Jamie. Yes, absolutely. When we were crafting the language and getting it done, we did reach out to the governor's office to talk to them. They were very cordial and took a meeting with me. I was talking to some of his direct cabinet folks, one of his deputy chiefs of staff, and one of his legislative affairs folks. And actually a member of the banking industry was on the phone call with us as well. Again, trying to hammer out what would be okay, what would not be okay. I talked about the transactions of the people in limbo that bought a house but couldn't sell their house, so they're stuck with 2 mortgages. And I talked about the ones that sold their house but hadn't currently moved into the new house, so they were living in a hotel. They had no housing. And I think in the governor's first iteration of when he did come out with the partial real estate stuff, that is probably one of the reasons why he did the up to March 18th thing, to be able to close those transactions that were in limbo. And I think it made no sense to us that, hey, if it's safe to do those, it's safe to do transactions. So that was the onus on why we pushed that. I will tell you, from the governor's staff, everything to them was safety, 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 safety. And they just weren't being logical on what's safe and what's not. I spoke to them about, hey, you can go into a Lowe's and I have 100 people, but you can do a real estate transaction with 1 or 2. And this is these people's livelihoods. I mean, at this point, folks have cabin fever. There's an increase in depression, suicides. There are outcomes that are bad that he's not realizing by keeping people cooped up like this. So real estate transactions seem like a very easy thing that we could do. And not only that, one of the nice side effects is it brings revenue. I mean, you got transfer taxes, that taxes go back to the state, taxes go to local. I didn't see any downside to putting this industry back. And it was something that was near and dear to my heart, so we just ran with it.
Senator Killion, that leads into a question that I have for you. I don't know of any member of the Senate or the House that knows more about the budget than you do. You've got that business and finance background, and as well as the experience of balancing past state budgets. And so, question for you is, from a budget and revenue perspective, how do you think this will compare to the last recession we had in terms of revenue and how you'll deal with that?
Well, the numbers are actually worse. The numbers are actually worse, which ties into why we should begin opening businesses in the Southeast. The Southeastern, I mean, we want to do it statewide, but here in the Southeast, we're the economic engine for the Commonwealth. Over 40% of the revenue comes from the PIT and sales is coming from the Southeast. So another reason why we need to open up businesses. but we're looking at probably anywhere between a $4 and $6 billion deficit. More than likely, we are going to do, not more than likely, I'm almost certain, we will do a 5-month budget because we really don't know what our revenues are. We don't know, taxes have been pushed off till July 15th. Our biggest months are usually April, so we didn't get those revenues in April. So we'll take the revenues that we have, get through 5 months, and as we get in the fall, look to, and also get a handle on the Fed money that's coming down and what we can and can't use it for. So I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see an interim budget, and then we're going to come back in the fall. We'll be talking in the meantime as numbers start to roll in July 15th. We'll begin to see the tax revenues. But this is numbers wise, this is a lot worse than the last recession.
And it seems to me that real estate is one of those industries that has such a huge impact on the state revenue, and it seems like it's the safest one to get back to work. So we know that you are making that argument with the governor, and we just encourage you to keep making that argument for us.
Yeah, and because you're exactly right. You all know better than me, but you buy a house, or you're buying furniture, you're at Home Depot, you're spending lots and lots of money, and that was one of the reasons in working closely with you that we made sure in the Senate that there was some talk about putting them all together, like the previous vote, and we made a strong case that it would be a lot smarter, keep the realtors separate, really put some pressure on the governor to sign this one because it makes perfect sense, and he can't say, well, it's too much, it's too much. So that was the one fight we had, was to, and it wasn't a fight. I mean, it was a matter of me talking to our leadership and explaining that we'd be a much better position if we do the realtors as a standalone bill, but we added legal services in there as well. But and I'm hopeful that he will sign it because of that it doesn't have all the other things in it.
Thanks, Senator. Pete, I know we have some questions coming in from the participants. What do you have for us?
One of the questions that came in was from a member asking about what amendments were made when it went through the Senate. If somebody read the bill a week ago, what changed since it was voted on in the House yesterday? Maybe Representative Polinchock could answer that.
I'll be glad to. The bill was initially amended in the House to include the legal services. That was one of the amendments that we had from one of my colleagues to add that in. Mainly, that was also one of the loopholes that we wanted to clean up because a lot of attorneys do real estate transactions, so it did kind of tie together with respect to that. When it went over to the Senate, the Senate did an amendment. It was almost a total rewrite, but they kept all the intricacies of the bill. The difference they did was they really actually made it better for the practitioner by ramping up the use and occupancy part of it. It went from a conditional use and occupancy in the original bill, where the buyers and sellers would have to negotiate the terms of who would be responsible when they got their use and occupancy. And the Senate bill just gave a blanket use and occupancy to get the transaction done, which was actually better. So that was the main change in the bill. It also specifically mentioned commercial real estate. The original bill was vague in that it included commercial real estate, but you could make an argument that maybe it didn't. So by the Senate amendment, it fixed that as well by specifically naming commercial real estate in the bill. Those were the main ones in it. I know someone's gonna ask about the home open house amendment that we tried to do in the House of Representatives. I tried to do that on the last day. A procedural vote would have been required to suspend the rules because we can't amend on third consideration in the House. They can in the Senate. And so we tried to suspend the rules to add no group open houses. If we follow COVID, we're not doing group open houses anyway, but that's what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted. And they did a little politics on us and voted to not allow the suspension of the rules, so we couldn't get that amendment in. We thought it might happen in the Senate. It didn't. But the way the language is written, it's strong enough that it follows the CDC guidelines. You're not going to have those giant group open houses anyway.
Okay, thank you. That you did answer a question a lot of other people have been asking about open houses. let's see here. So how would changing real estate to essential in PA impact the pandemic unemployment assistance program? Would realtors still qualify for that program if the industry is considered essential? I don't know if Mike or somebody else could answer that.
So what's been explained to us is that the two are not necessarily one and the same. Just because you would be deemed essential would not necessarily disqualify you for unemployment compensation. The big issue or test is, has your income gone down as a result of the pandemic? So you would still apply for the unemployment compensation, show what your earnings are, and that would then show what you would otherwise qualify for in terms of unemployment compensation.
Okay. Combining a couple of questions here, do we have any idea when we might expect a response from the governor, and what is the backup plan if he does veto it?
I mean, I'll start off, and then if Todd or anybody else wants to chime in. I mean, he's been on the radio. I think it was yesterday. He was very specifically asked, would he be inclined to sign the bills that were headed his way, and his answer was no. So he certainly signaled what his intention is. He has 10 days to make a public veto or signing of the bill. So it's kind of unclear whether he's going to drag that process out or whether he's going to do anything quickly. Then the next question is what's next? If he does veto it, one of the options is to ask the House Majority Leader and Senate Majority Leader to run a veto override. That is a much more complicated process that we would have to go through in terms of just the politics of it. And as I think Todd pointed out earlier, we were 2 votes short in the House on having an override majority. So we would have to keep not only the people who voted for us this time, but we would have to flip at least 2 other people to vote for us if there was an override vote. We continue to encourage our members to respond to the call to action. If the governor does veto the bill, you are going to see our social media messaging change in all likelihood, where we're asking you to call the governor's office and take the message off of 2412, but continue to put the pressure on him that we need him to identify real estate as an essential service. So that's the likely next step. And again, not to get too much inside baseball, but Jamie and I were talking about this a little bit earlier when he was hosting a congressional town hall, asking Democratic members of Congress to reach out to the governor. I mean, really, the people that seem to have the most ability to get through to him are people within his own party. Within his own party. Again, not to be partisan about it, but we think those are the most impactful kind of behind-the-scene conversations that can happen. We could try to run another bill, which again is something that we'll evaluate. But again, our main goal is to try to get the governor's attention and have a conversation with him about possibly even doing an executive order to open real estate on a statewide basis so that we don't have to continue going through the legislative process.
Thanks, Mike. I have a question I'm seeing from Andrew Wetzel. What did Mr. Polinchock mean about the UNO process? If a municipality is not working, someone has to either accept responsibility for what may happen after settlement or escrow funds, which no one wants to do. Being essential in a red zone still has a roadblock. And Todd.
Yeah, I'll take that, Jamie. It actually, that was one of the reasons why we had that put into the actual bill. It's actually not a roadblock. The way it'll be right now is the use and occupancy, some municipalities don't even have use and occupancies. Some of them are nothing but a sidewalk and a GFI inspection. Some of them are more intricate. But what this does is it just gives you you get a yes from that township to transact the property. Now, what the buyers and sellers negotiate on their own is part of the negotiating process. Hey, you know what? I'll be on the hook for this or that. 90% of that stuff's going to be uncovered during a home inspection anyway. Maybe not the sidewalk cracks or something like that, but most of that stuff's going to be covered and negotiated in the normal real estate transaction. So I don't see the roadblock on that. As long as the buyer and seller can negotiate out the terms, the township will not be an impediment to you moving on. And really quickly, while I have your attention, this takes I don't know if you can see it. It takes 2 minutes. No, probably not. It says sign 2412. Everybody get your selfie and load social media up with the governor today, and everyone get your little sign 2412 signs out. We're putting them all over the place to try to get him. We're doing hashtag sign 2412 just to try to get the word to the governor, because the way he's going to acquiesce on this is by pressure. Right now, he's leaning on not signing the bill, but if we can put enough pressure on him and show him that this is something that can be done, and respectfully too, don't go attacking him on social media with all kind of harsh stuff about him or his Secretary of Health. Just push that we can do this safely. If you get the word out that we can do this safely, that's the number one concern for him, and that's where I see us going. Again, I'm a freshman. I'm gonna defer the center on the how-tos because he's been doing this a lot longer than me. So thanks.
Everybody covered it well. They're the options we have. The governor can either sign it or veto it or do nothing. If he does nothing, in 10 days it becomes law. So, but I think, we'll see, depending on the pressure he gets, to see what he does. And then, then Mike explained that we can look to do an override vote. But now, and that I would like to see it, because it would put some of the folks in a really tough position. But then again, you have people having to choose between doing what I consider right and what their constituents want, and if you're in the Democratic Party, what the governor wants. And there'll be a lot of pressure on them not to override the governor, because that's a real slap in the face to the guy who heads your party. So I'm hopeful that he'll just realize that this makes perfect sense, both from a safety standpoint and from an economic standpoint, and he'll sign it and go from there.
Mike, do you want to talk about the call to action that you have actively going right now?
Yeah, so I think there's someone asking, what can an individual agent do or a broker do? We've stood up a campaign called Housing is Essential, and it's on housingIsEssential.org. That includes a letter writing campaign to the governor. It includes a phone call patch through to the governor's office. We are encouraging you to respond as agents, share it with your clients and customers. We've had almost 8,000 responses since the bill passed yesterday, which is a tremendous response. But the fact that we have 35,000 agents in our association means that we're about 25-30% participation. We need more than that. And we need to continue to put the pressure on the governor's office to let him know that we're serious, and we have been since day one. But again, this goes back to the basics of politics, and people listen to their constituents. It's one of the reasons we had overwhelming support in both the House and the Senate, because you were active, you got engaged, and we just need you to continue to push the ball forward and have your voice heard. And again, we're hearing from you're telling us your clients and customers are frustrated too. Get them involved, because the more that this goes beyond just us as realtors, it just adds to our message and the base of support. So again, it's housingIsEssential.org.
I do want to point out, Mike, that we spoke a little bit about this before the webinar. We are seeing our own county commissioners and county council members from Delaware County, so Bucks County, Delaware County, Chester County. Their Democratic commissioners and council members have been reaching out to the governor and asking him to number one, consider possibly changing the calculation for the metric and taking long-term care facilities out, because we are seeing a vast majority of complications coming in at those places. So they are pushing as well. This is not a partisan push at all, and that does give me some hope that even if we're not successful with the legislation, we could see a vastly improved executive order that is a result of the legislation, and also pressure coming from outside.
No, excellent point. Thank you.
So another question that came in is regarding appraisers, and with the possibility of permitting appraisers to enter properties when an interior appraisal is required by lenders. So, and maybe just as a broader question, HB 2412, how does it affect some of the other professions related to real estate that aren't realtors?
Yeah, I could take that, Pete. That's we built that in. We went from the start of the transaction all the way to the settlement table, and everything in between we kind of built into the legislation. I'll tell you, I like to give them a shout out all the time. One of our SRA leaders and one of your state leaders, Chris Beedling, I think he's your first vice president right now, was the guy who crafted the legislation with me. He put it down on paper, and then we kind of knocked it around to look at what are we missing, and we kind of covered everything. Home inspectors are allowed to enter the property. Again, all this is going to be done using the CDC guidelines and the following that CISA, the social distancing. But so yes, home inspectors can come in and go out. Appraisers can come in, go out. A lot of right now, I know some folks trying to refinance homes because of the great interest rates. They can't, because the appraisers can't get in the houses. They will be if this legislation passed. Appraisers will be allowed in. Photographers, video, virtual tour folks. It's all built into the process. Anyone that needs to get in for the sake of a transaction will be able to go in by themselves. The homeowner will be out at that time while they go in. The inspector will go in and then go out. So again, everything can be done with minimal personal contact of any type. But yes, the appraisers are covered by that as well.
I see a question coming in from Vince Range, who is one of our board members. What is the likelihood of an executive order being put in place if the veto does occur? So an improved executive order, what's the likelihood of that?
I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. It is, since the legislation has gone to his desk, we're hearing a little bit more, at least crackling or static, that the administration might want to talk to us. But again, it's still kind of early in the process, and I'm the sense we're getting is, he doesn't like to have his back put up against the wall through the legislative process. So if he does veto it, that would potentially open the door to have that conversation. But I don't think it's a remote. I think it's a realistic possibility that we might get that.
And Jamie, if I could elaborate on that real quick. Prior to us going on the final vote in the House, I got a call from the governor's office that he was opening up partial real estate services. It wasn't statewide, and it was it had the enforcement up to and including license. You have your licensees, so that was unacceptable. But by us putting this pressure on, he's moving. He's opening up counties faster than he wanted to, and he's moving with this stuff. So I do think that even before this bill, the options are sign it, veto it, let it become law in 10 days, or do an executive action where it becomes a moot point. So that is a fourth possibility that I'm sure he's probably weighing out.
Senator Killion, you were in office, during the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, and we came out of that very strong fashion, balancing the budget, getting things back on track. So what do you see moving forward with this pandemic, and what are you thinking in terms of helping to kickstart the economy once again?
Well, we got to get the businesses open first and foremost, because that's where we get our tax revenue. I think once we get beyond this and we are getting closer, that things will start picking up again. But it's going to take a while. I mean, we have a significant deficit, and a lot of it will depend on what the federal government gives us. They're talking about another round of money for the states, so we'll see how that plays out. But it's just going to take some time. I mean, we're not looking to raise taxes. That would be in this climate, I think, a really, really, really foolish thing to do. So I think we just got to once we know we got people back to work, hopefully by early fall, have everybody in the green, which I wish you would define how you get into the green. I haven't even told us yet. At least they've defined how to get to yellow, but they've not defined how to get to green. Excuse me. So we got to see. The ball really is in his court right now.
Mike, beyond HB 2412, can you tell us a little bit about PAR moving forward? What you've got planned to get the industry moving again, and what kind of safety not regulations but guidelines are you putting in place to help our realtors operate in this new environment?
Yeah, and even to address maybe a comment that somebody had made in the chat here, that questioning what we have provided to the governor or not provided to the governor. Two significant documents, I think, that we have provided to him and as well as to our members. Number one, President Festus set up a task force to look at the other states in the country that have best practices in terms of CDC guidelines, in terms of how you operate a showing, developing a couple of forms for our members to use as part of a real estate transaction. And we actually gave that information to our contacts at the governor's office and said, hey, here's our recommended way that the industry can move forward. And they have a copy of that. Hopefully, if they are looking at any potential guidelines, sorry, the lawnmower is going on behind me here. If they are looking at any other guidelines, they're going to take those into consideration. We also sent them a 6-page letter, which again, we posted on our website, outlining some of the contradictions and inconsistencies that we saw in the guidance documents that DOS has issued, as well as how it compared and contrasted with what they allow contractors to do. And probably the lowest hanging fruit on that one is why can you have 4 renovation or repair people in a house at any particular time, and how is that at all rational that you would say that can't happen for a real estate transaction when literally you could have 4 contractors in your house for 8 consecutive hours and they have less stringent PPE requirements than the governor has on our members in their guidance documents. That was actually another area where we actually did get a response from the governor's office saying, hey, we want to work with you to provide some guidance. And that was all we heard from them. So that's really the frustrating thing on our end, is we keep trying to open the lines of communication. We try to create the breadcrumb trail as to how we think things can effectively work for our members on a statewide basis. I am optimistic, though, that we are going to hear a little bit more conversation, just because the amount of pressure that the last week and a half we've been able to put on the administration through the legislative process, as well as, again, the work that you guys have been doing with county commissioners and members of the delegation, congressional delegation. So I think there's at least some cracks for us to try to explore and get the line of communication back open with the administration.
So how about a little bit of a change here, and we have a state representative and a state senator online with us, and I'd like to ask both of you, for your constituents, realtor constituents in your districts, what's the best way to get in touch with you if they have questions about unemployment or there are other issues that you might be able to help them with?
For me, just my staff is working remotely, but they check our voicemail constantly. And then for the unemployment, and we've got a lot of them we're working on. just call the office at area code 610-447-3163 and leave a message, and we'll get right back to you on any issue. Doesn't just have to be unemployment compensation, but any issue. That's what we're there for. And we have, as you heard, I mixed up my Zoom calls. I was about to say you heard from Steve. I was on a Zoom before this with Steve Brewer where he talked about unemployment, and I got another one at 3 o'clock. But the problems are enormous. But we do have liaisons we can go to. It's still taking some time to get folks through, but we can sometimes expedite it a little bit.
Todd.
Thanks, Jamie. And for me, for specific unemployment compensation claims, we're getting a ton of those. Everyone wants to speak to me directly. I'm not the expert on that. I have a great staff member. Her name is Kira Rumble. She's my district manager. So email her at krumble, like a rumble seat, KRUMBLE at pahousegop.com. krumble at pahousegop.com for unemployment comp stuff. That goes directly to her. She's been very helpful. Now just be patient. We do have a lot. We're getting inundated with it, but by all means, if you're in my district, please reach out to her. We're there to help. Anything else, it'd be best to just either email us. You can email me. Mine is just tpolinchock at pahousegop.com. You can send me, or our phone number is the best way because we check it continuously. 215-822-1840. 215-822-1840. We are working remotely right now, but starting Monday, we're going to be staffed at least partially 4 days a week. Going to run Port and Starboard with my 2 staff members. They'll be in the office. We will not be accepting appointments yet, and when we do, it'll be by appointment only. We won't be doing walk-ins. We're actually in the process of putting up plexiglass wall and a door buzzer so that we can protect the folks, our constituents, when they come in for when we need face-to-face meetings. We're not starting that yet, obviously, but 215-822-1840 would be your best bet, and we will get back to you. It may take a day or two, but we will get back to you, and we'll address whatever you need.
And also, let me give you my email. It's tkillion, KILLION, at pacen.gov. And then my person you can always call the office and they'll get back to you. But you can also email Teresa in my office, and that's tdelcampo, TDELCAMPO at pacen.gov.
So what I would emphasize with these emails is that we have over 50 state representatives and senators in our 4 counties. And so if you will please contact your own state representative or state senator. We have a lot of realtors in Senator Killion's district and a lot of realtors in Representative Polinchock's district, but it's much easier if you talk to your own member of the House or Senate, and then we won't overwhelm them with calls coming outside of the district. So we will post a link on our Facebook page right after this webinar that will show you how to find out who your member is if you don't know that already. All right, Pete, any more last questions from the audience?
Well, on that subject of contacting representatives, a couple of people have asked for the best number to contact the governor, and I wonder, is that a good idea to call by phone, or are other methods, do you think, more effective?
I'll just add that's part of our housingIsessential.org campaign, and it's literally a patch-through process. So if you go to that website and either send an email or they'll directly patch you through to the governor's office to make that call. Okay.
And one other question, I don't know if this was addressed already, but is there anything that the legislation or that the legislators can do in Pennsylvania to help ensure in future emergencies that real estate is considered life essential, so we don't have to fight this fight again in 5 or 10 years if it happens again?
Well, that's all part of the executive order, so that depends who's the governor at the time. God, I hope we don't have to get through a situation like this again. But yeah, we're drafting a bill in the Senate right now. I'm doing it with 3 other members to limit the powers of the executive orders, that they can't go on. You know, we're still under executive order on the opiate crisis, which I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but they shouldn't go on and on. We're drafting legislation that after 60 days, the legislature gets to weigh in whether it should continue or not.
Okay. No, just a lot of thanks to the legislators and to PAR coming in for everyone's hard work on this. But I think we've run through most of the questions now.
Okay,
Pete,
great.
may I comment just quick, Jamie?
Yes.
I want to thank the PAR and SRA. A lot of folks on this call don't know that both you and Mike have extensive backgrounds with working with legislatures, so we've got two really good guys running the ships for us. And because of the work that's been done, PAR did a ton of legwork on getting this through. We've been in contact every single day, myself, and PAR, working on this, working on language, working on what our next step is. And this is why we have our association at times like this to get this done. So PAR has been fantastic, and I know what SRA has been doing for years through working with our municipalities. It's the reason we're at a really good market where we're at. So I want to personally thank Jamie and Mike and your organizations for the work you did on this. You helped us get over the finish line in record time, and I just want to thank you for that. And finally, Senator Killion, absolutely thank you so much for moving this bill and being a champion for us. You've always been good to our association and to the organization, and I'm thrilled to be able to work with you now through the legislature. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just add to that. Every industry wanted to be open. Everybody wanted their own bill. If it wasn't for the strength of your association and Todd's work in the House, it wouldn't happen. By far, and I've said this many times, and I deal with lots of different lobbying efforts. The realtors your association is way ahead of everybody else. In seconds, you have the emails out, the contacts out, and that's why you've got a separate bill, and that's why we're poised maybe to have the governor do the right thing in the next day or next few days. So congratulations for all your hard work.
Thanks, Senator. Mike, any final parting words of encouragement for our members?
Again, just thanking everybody. Keep up the good work. Keep the messages going into the governor's office. Again, as I started off, thank you for the partnership we have with the SRA and the local associations. And again, thank you, Representative Polinchock and Senator Killion. They've always been Realtor champions. So it's been a pleasure working with you.
Great. All right. With that, I will close this off. I want to say a special thank you to Senator Killion, Representative Polinchock, our friends, Mike McGee, for all that you are doing at PAR. This has been a great 1 hour, and thank you again for taking time out of your very busy schedules, and as always for your friendship and the way you champion for us. So thank you very much, and thanks everybody for joining us for this webinar.
Thank you.